When you think of mobile games, a lot of games probably come to mind, but by far what most people think of is Clash of Clans, being arguably the most iconic mobile game of the decade next to Subway Surfers and Angry Birds. Created by Supercell in 2012, since its release, the game had become more than just another strategic online multiplayer. With its simple but addictive gameplay and very iconic commercials, the game would go on to make billions of dollars, and quite literally create its own genre, with many imitators trying to get their piece of Clash's success. There were the cheap knockoffs that didn't really go anywhere, then there were the somewhat decent copies that tried to be different, but they only lasted a few years. However, there was one that stood above the rest, and while not at the same level of success as its precursor, it would go on to create its own legacy that would last for 7 years before being inevitably shut down. The game I'm talking about is Samurai Siege. Now at first glance, it might seem like an ordinary Clash of Clans clone with a Japanese theme, but it was much more than that, being able to match Clash of Clans' success by getting over 300,000 players in less than 2 weeks, and within a year the game made a profit of $12 million, which is no small feat. And by the end of its 7-year run, it was downloaded a total of 17 million times globally and amassed roughly over $37 million. So what happened? What made it succeed where others failed? And why would they shut down a game that was still going strong? Well, to understand the full picture, we first need to look back at its roots, starting with its developers. Samurai Siege was created by Ape Games, a London-based company most notable for the games like BeatStar and Rifle Kingdoms. But before they were this big company similar to Supercell, they were a fairly small indie studio of only a dozen people. Established in 2012, the Space Ape crew has gotten enough cash from a few investors to develop 3 games, and hoped that at least one of those 3 would succeed and make their money back. A couple of ideas were thrown around, but in the end they came up with Samurai Siege. Fun fact, before it was called Samurai Siege, it was originally going to be called Guardians of the Forbidden City, which was going to be a space-themed game with a complex plot, hence their name Space Ape. But it was changed after getting feedback from their potential audience to make it much simpler. So they got to work, and after 6 months, Samurai Siege was finally released. And literally overnight, the game was a big success, gaining over 300,000 players in 2 weeks and making over 20 million by the end of the year. Personally, I think the game's success can be attributed to them being an indie studio, as they were a group of dedicated people who loved video games and put their passion over profit. In their commercials and behind the scenes stuff, you can see that they enjoy what they do and that creativity resonates with players. For example, the infamous Watermelon Troop. Someone on the staff made a watermelon sprite and they went, "Hey, you know what would be funny?" So with the developers in mind, you can piece together what kind of game Samurai Siege is. What the game had over Clash of Clans was 3 things: story, creativity, and variety. So starting with story, it's one of the only Clash-like games with an actually decent one, which is not a really super complex story, but it has just enough to keep you engaged, as it also provides context to your troops as you unlock them. Additionally, one key feature I love is how it limits your troops. You can't just pick and choose what to bring, instead you are given a set of units to use, and it basically becomes a bit of a puzzle game to figure out the best way to beat a stage. This also serves as a tutorial on teaching players how to use said units and form strategies with them against other players online. Speaking of which, without a doubt, Clash of Clans characters are much more iconic and full of personalities, especially as seen in their commercials. But in the actual game, it's not the same. This is where Samurai Siege shines, as their characters are more fun to use. For example, ninja troops will primarily target loot like goblins, but have ranged shurikens who allow them to attack over walls. Then there's the ram, who is the superior version of the bomber, as there are 4 of them and they can break through multiple walls. Even after their battering ram is destroyed, they'll still keep fighting with their little hammers, which is kinda funny. Samurai Siege also has an exclusive unit, the Commander, as they have the ability to make troops attack defense towers. In Clash, they only have units that target towers specifically, like Hog Riders and air balloons. But with the Commander, this opens up a lot of potential strategies, as any troop can now target a base's main line of defense. And it only gets better from here, as after getting to a certain level, troops can turn into variants of themselves by swapping out their weapons. So for example, the default Samurai, you can choose to swap out their katanas to fire swords, which change their playstyle by allowing them to hit multiple targets at once, but at a reduced power. This feature also applies to buildings. The best example is the Archer Tower, as you can swap out normal arrows with fire arrows that do splash damage at the cost of damage, Then there's the heavy arrows that does the opposite, being much slower and only targeting one at a time, but with higher damage and can push enemies back. So with many options to choose how to train your troops and build your base, there's usually no one key strategy to win. Then there's one more feature that Siege has, which is the Onyx shop. Basically a more premium version of the gems, but it has to be earned instead of bought. You can use Onyx to get specialty items like weapon variants for troops, special hero troops, special buildings, and even special building upgrades. All of these unique features help the game feel fresh and alive. Now onto the final thing that Siege was actually superior over, which was Clan Wars. In Siege, there's actually two of these modes called Alliance Wars and Conquests. Alliance Wars is similar to Clan Wars, but you fight against 3 alliances for supremacy. As for Conquest, it's almost the same, but the objective is about strategically taking more bases on the map. These modes relied on teamwork and coordination. As a result, the game became well known for forming communities. As with the many features it has, it can be complicated for new players to get used to, so that's when veteran players can step in and help out, creating new friendships that might even last long after the game was discontinued. So with everything going for it, what happened? Well, the game was too successful and at the same time, not successful enough. You see, by 2016, Space Ape reached $96 million in profits, and Supercell took notice of that. So a year later, in 2017, they would buy 62% of Space Ape, forming a partnership between companies that still lasts even to this day. And while you'd think this would be the reason for its shutdown since Clash of Clans would be a direct rival of it, the game would still be around for another 3 years. However, the game began to stagnate as their partnership brought new opportunities and, more importantly, new responsibilities. Space Ape was still kind of small at the time, and they were still passionate of games, so of course they were gonna want to try something new. But now working on new projects with a big company like Supercell, while still having to manage their own games, they were bound to pull the plug on one of their old ones. And while Samurai Siege was their first success, its time has long passed and was no longer doing as well as their other games like Rival Kingdoms or Transformer Earth Wars. Plus, Samurai Siege, as good as it was, had its own fair share of downsides. The main one being the atrocious frame rate that was so bad that even footage from the developers themselves was slow, while Clash of Clans continued to evolve. So by August 5th, 2020, 7 years after the game was first released, Samurai Siege's reign was finally over. After its shutdown, Space Ape would find more success, starting with Beatstar, a rhythm-based game that looks like a mix between Piano Tiles and Rock Band, and also considered their best game to date that made more money than all of their previous games combined. Then a year later, in 2021, they were given access to one of Supercell's IPs and created Boom Beach Frontline, which was just a MOBA of their least popular game. And they might have more plans in the future, as just this year, Rival Kingdoms met a similar fate by being shut down, possibly for a future game. In the end, Samurai Siege was the seed that let Space Ape grow, and through time and effort, the game flourished into something a bit different to the genre and defined its own legacy. And while its time has ended, its story continues through Space Ape. So as the sun sets on Samurai Siege, we should look forward to a new beginning on the horizon. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was actually a big fan of Samurai Siege over Clash of Clans because of the design and overall variety it had at the time. It's a shame that it ended, but it was fun while it lasted. October is just around the corner, so I'll be shifting my focus back to spooky stuff, starting with Day Shift at Freddy's and the Miller family. If you don't know what the SAF is, don't worry, I'll try to make the video enjoyable for both longtime fans and newcomers. So with that, please give the video a like and subscribe. And don't forget to leave a comment about what you'd like me to cover in a future video, or any other obscure mobile game you'd like back then. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.